How a photograph almost ruined Burberry. In 2002, a photograph appeared in the British press. It showed a woman dressed head to toe in Burberry check, coat, cap, and accessories. Even the stroller carrying her baby was wrapped in the pattern. The image circulated quickly, and the commentary that followed was savage. One national newspaper said she had rolled about in the fabric like a pig in mud. Burberry's executives saw the photograph. They also saw the sales reports. And that combination, strong revenue, public ridicule, was precisely the crisis they had been trying to avoid for years and had now, unmistakably, arrived. The fabric that built an empire. The story begins not in a Paris boutique or a London fashion house, but in the English countryside in 1856. Thomas Burberry was a draper in Basingstoke with an unusual obsession. He wanted to build a coat that could survive British weather. Not merely resisted, but defeated entirely. For decades, he experimented with fabric blends, coatings, and waxing techniques. In 1888, that obsession produced gabardine, a tightly woven fabric treated with lanolin, the natural wax derived from sheep's wool. The result was a textile that was simultaneously breathable and weatherproof, sturdy without being suffocating. Nothing like it existed on the market. Burberry understood that an extraordinary product still needed to be seen. He dressed explorers and sportsmen in gabardine jackets, aligned the brand with hunting and fishing and the outdoor pursuits of England's upper classes, and in 1901 held a logo design competition that produced the Equestrian Knight device that remains in use today. By the time the brand had opened in London and Paris and found stockists in New York and Buenos Aires, Burberry had established something more than a coat company. It had established a position, the outfitter of people who went to difficult places and expected not to suffer for it. The trench and the wars. When the First World War broke out, British officers needed durable outerwear for the trenches. Burberry was the obvious answer. The army commissioned the company to produce at scale, and the resulting garments absorbed the practical demands of combat. D-rings on the belt for equipment, a gun flap on the shoulder, a design built for movement in wet and cold conditions. The trench coat, as it would come to be known, was named after the environments that produced it. Inside that coat, largely unremarked upon at the time, was a lining in a beige tartan with stripes of black, white, and red. It had no particular significance, it was simply there. By the time the war ended, Burberry held a royal warrant as a tailor to the crown, earned in 1919. The brand had become, in the truest sense, a British institution. The Second World War reinforced that standing. The army commissioned Burberry again, and while uniforms were being produced for the front, the company was also placing its coats on Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca in 1943 and on Marlene Dietrich in A Foreign Affair in 1948, cementing the trench coat not as wartime utility, but as cinematic permanence. The soldier's garment had become the leading man's choice. The fabric escapes. In 1955, the British retail conglomerate Great Universal Stores acquired Burberry. The brand's reputation was impeccable, its products were well regarded, and rather than invest in new design or operational infrastructure, the new owners allowed the company to coast on the credibility it had accumulated over a century. The licensing agreements that followed would define the next several decades, and not favorably. Burberry began licensing its name, its logo, and its check to manufacturers in Spain and Japan, producing diffusion lines at significantly reduced prices. The Japanese subsidiary lines, Burberry Black and Burberry Blue, alone generated the equivalent of over $11 billion in today's money in Asian sales. That was the problem. The lines sold so well that the product began flowing back into European markets through unofficial channels, sitting alongside the main line in stores and undermining the very exclusivity that justified Burberry's position as a luxury brand. Then, in 1967, a store manager at Burberry's Paris location named Jacqueline Delmar made a decision that would reverberate for decades. Dressing a window display, she folded back the hem of a trench coat to expose the check lining. Customers responded immediately. They wanted the pattern visible. They wanted it on bags, on umbrellas, on scarves. Burberry obliged. The pattern became a product, and the licensing agreements meant that the diffusion lines could sell that check at a fraction of the price. By the 1980s, the pattern that had once been an interior detail was one of the most recognized motifs in global fashion, and because it was everywhere, it meant everything, which was already beginning to mean nothing. The descent. Recognition is not the same as desire. By the late 1980s, Burberry's core clientele had narrowed to Asian tourists, middle-aged businessmen, and an older demographic that had grown up with the brand. The image was dated. Internally, the company was underfunded and structurally weak. The licensing model continued to generate revenue, but it was producing an increasingly incoherent public identity. And then came the football terraces. English football fans, particularly those associated with the hooligan culture that plagued the sport through the 1980s, adopted the Burberry check as a kind of uniform. The pattern appeared on caps, scarves, and jackets worn by men who came to matches and to European venues and to city centers expressly to cause trouble. Burberry was now appearing in newspaper coverage not as a luxury garment, but as the identifying mark of public disorder. The British press connected the check to what was being called chav culture, a pejorative for working-class youth associated with antisocial behavior. The brand had no answer for it. Street vendors in London made the problem worse. Counterfeit Burberry check was produced and sold so widely that the brand was losing both revenue and authorship of its own identity. The pattern was everywhere, real and fake, on people the brand had never intended to dress, at price points that communicated the opposite of luxury. 20% of Burberry's entire product range carried the check by the early 2000s. Then came the Asian financial crisis of 1997. Burberry's Asian operations, on which the brand had become disproportionately dependent, collapsed. Sales fell from £62 million to £25 million in a single period, a drop of nearly 60%. For a supposedly global brand, the exposure was extraordinary. The fragility of the entire structure was now visible. The first rescue. By 1998, the company understood it had a serious problem and began taking it seriously. A new creative director, Roberto Menechidi, was appointed. The name was adjusted. New lines were introduced: Burberry Brit for accessible entry-level products, Burberry London for business attire, and Burberry Prosum as the luxury offering, which used the check sparingly or not at all. Prosum was the name under which Burberry would show at Fashion Week, and it was deliberately distanced from the associations that had corroded the main brand. An advertising campaign followed, built around successful British figures: Kate Moss, Emma Watson, Cara Delevingne, Romeo Beckham. The message was Britishness reconsidered, not the check, not heritage as nostalgia, but the country as the origin of something contemporary and desirable. Sales began to recover. By 2001 and 2002, global operating profits rose 21% to £90 million. But Roberto's tenure was short and complicated. Production difficulties beset the Prosum line. The collection that debuted in London Fashion Week in 2000 drew criticism for over-reliance on the check, the very problem the line had been created to solve. The relationship ended in what was described at the time in terms that suggested a difficult separation. Into that gap stepped Christopher Bailey. He had studied at the Royal College of Art in London, worked for Donna Karan and Tom Ford's Gucci, and understood the American market and the European luxury hierarchy. He was British by background and international by formation, exactly what the brand needed as the face and brain of its recovery. Bailey's approach to Prosum was methodical, and by Burberry standards, radical. He removed the check from the collection almost entirely. He relocated the fashion shows to Milan, signaling its aspirations. He moved production toward higher quality manufacturing. The check did not disappear from the brand altogether, but it ceased to be the primary language of Burberry's highest tier. By 2004, after 3 years, Bailey was named Chief Creative Officer. By 2013, he was also chief executive. Under his direction, Burberry brought 23 licensing agreements back in-house, including one that was producing Burberry check diapers for dogs. The Japanese diffusion lines, Burberry Black and Burberry Blue, were terminated 5 years before the contractual end date in 2015, at the cost of hundreds of stores and millions in annual revenue. It was considered worth it. In 2011, Burberry became the first major fashion house to live stream a runway show, making the autumn-winter presentation free to the public online. The company had moved its shows back to London Fashion Week the previous year. Direct-to-consumer retail had grown from 43% of distribution in 2005 to 64% by 2011. Burberry had reinvented not only what it sold, but how luxury fashion reached its audience. The check had been reduced from 20% of the product range to roughly 5%. Scarcity had been restored. The upper-class clientele that had abandoned the brand returned. High-end retailers restocked it. Sales